Hello and welcome along or welcome back to Future Now, the new podcast from global innovation platform and EG sister brand Springwise. Each month, we bring you the latest stories, conversations and insights from across the world of sustainable and climate innovation, the people, the projects and the big ideas shaping our collective future. So it's the week beginning 10th of November, and in this episode, we're going to be diving into the world of food, specifically how innovators are reimagining what we eat so our favourite foods can survive a changing climate. Coming up, we'll be hearing from Mark Golder, who's the CEO of cocoa-free chocolate brand Win Win.
The chocolate industry is really in a crisis that's driven by climate change. Our solution is to create that same tasty, chocolatey treat, but without needing the cacao at all.
Anna-Sophie Dietjen, who's the founder of Morrow, a startup that's reimagining the world's favourite drink with coffee-free coffee.
The more we started looking into coffee as a crop, we realised the challenges in the space, not just from a supply chain point of view, but also from a sustainability perspective. It is a monoculture. It's quite a climate-sensitive crop, and with the increasing radical kind of extreme weather changes, there's been lots of challenges for farmers to actually produce coffee consistently.
And Jean-Philippe Laborde, the managing director at household staple Tilda Rice.
Even a corporate like Tilda, we can also bridge the gap on long-term and short-term. So long-term for us is clearly how we can reduce our carbon footprint, but at the same time, in short-term, is how we can also guarantee a better revenue for farmers, because we can't play with their living. And the way we do it is to demonstrate the benefits they can get by changing farming practices and also getting a better net revenues at the end of the crop.
Plus, it's a bumper episode because the COP30 Climate Summit is in full swing and the star-studded Earthshot Prize ceremony has just happened. So we'll be unwrapping all of that and more right here on Future Now. Yes, hello and welcome to Future Now. I'm Matilda Cox, the content editor at Springwise, coming to you from our studio at the Springwise office in East Grinstead. Once again, I'm pleased to say that I'm not just talking to myself in here. I'm also joined by Springwise's commissioning editor, Matt Hempstead. So Matt, it's been a pretty jam-packed few weeks for Springwise and climate tech more generally. Do you want to give the listeners a bit of an overview on what's been on our radar?
Yes, well, it certainly has been a busy period. How are you holding up?
I'm doing well, Matt. How are you?
Yeah. And the reason why it's been, one of the reasons why it's been quite busy these past few weeks for us is that this is the time of year when we're thinking about all things Earthshot.
Yeah.
So for those of you who don't know, the Earthshot Prize was set up by Prince William in 2021. It plays a really great role in showcasing and providing a kind of marquee event for climate innovations, which is really cool. And we've been part of it as a official nominator for a couple of years now. So in October, the finalists were announced, and it was quite interesting this year. There were a few different types of organisations that were included amongst the finalists this year. So a couple of sort of cities and municipalities, which is quite interesting and a different approach. But there were a few familiar faces from Springwise land, which is mostly focused on startups. So there was, for example, Matter, which is a washing machine filter, and Form Energy, which is a company based in the US that produces iron air battery energy storage systems for the grid. So we've previously featured them on Springwise, and so it's great to see them getting the recognition. Yeah. Another timely mention from the Earthshot finalist cohort is the Tropical Forest Forever facility. Had to practice saying that. It is a bit of a tongue twister, which is a $125 billion global investment fund that provides countries with long-term funding to protect their tropical forests. And now that, of course, is topical because we're right in the midst of COP at the moment, and it's actually officially being launched at COP30 in Belém, which started this past Monday. And now I don't know where we are in the space-time continuum of where you're going to be when you're going to be listening to this podcast, but imagine that it's been launched this Monday.
Yeah, so absolutely. So we've got COP going on at the moment, and then we also had the official Earthshot Prize Awards ceremony, and that was also taking place over in Brazil. So not only were we lucky enough to see the likes of Kylie Minogue doing her stuff on stage, but we also saw the announcements of this year's 5 winners. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Earthshot categories, that includes solutions that are going to protect and restore nature, clean our air, revive our oceans, build a waste-free world, and fix our climate. So as kind of all previous years, it was obviously a really impressive array of individuals and organisations, and as Matt said, kind of an interesting take on solutions, a lot more kind of cities, municipalities. But one that stood out to me was actually for that last Earthshot, the Fix Our Climate Earthshot, and that was Friendship. So Friendship is...
And that's an organisation.
It is. It's not
friendship.
I love my friends, but yeah. Yeah, so it's a social purpose organisation in Bangladesh. So they started out, I think they've been going for well over a decade now, and they started off as just one floating hospital providing emergency healthcare, because a lot of the coastlines in Bangladesh and obviously elsewhere have been majorly hit by the effects of climate change, so like flooding, cyclones. But since then, Friendship has grown into kind of a really massive operation that provides, so it's still got the floating hospitals, the emergency healthcare, food, clean water access, and then also they build these kind of climate resilient schools and structures on stilts that can kind of help them withstand this extreme weather. So on the topic of climate resilience, I'm going to seamlessly segue into the topic of this episode, which is a climate-proofed food system. So Matt, in this episode, we're talking to innovators who are reimagining what sustainability looks like for their respective foods and crops. So for today, that includes coffee, chocolate and rice. Could you talk us through why that's so important?
Yeah, absolutely. So for an industry that's so heavily dedicated and shaped by the weather, it follows quite naturally that climate change has an enormous impact on the global food system. Extreme temperatures, floods, storms, drought, all these climate nasties all dictate in a very direct way how successful or unsuccessful a harvest will be, and that can mean massive drops in crop yield, farmer income, and increasingly global food insecurity. So I mean, we know that farmers, they don't operate on a massive margin.
Yeah.
That's everywhere in the world, so we know it's a very kind of precarious existence a lot of the time. So this really does kind of bring it home in a very human, but also in a kind of systems way, the impact of climate change. In fact, it's estimated that for every 1 degree increase in average land temperature, global food production will drop by the equivalent of 4.4% of a person's average daily calories consumption. So that, I mean, you don't get many quite as concrete and a real quote unquote stats that really bring climate change home as that. And I think what's really sad is that a lot of our favourite snacks and our favourite foods are actually the ones that are most affected by climate. So I mean, I love a coffee. I'm back and forth to that coffee machine regularly throughout the day.
We're big fans.
We've got a nice fancy shiny one in the office, which is nice. And also I do love a bit of chocolate, especially at Christmas as well. And because of where they're grown and their kind of particularities of their climate sensitivity, we've actually seen massive fluctuations in the prices of both coffee and chocolate over the last few years. Rice is like slightly different in the sense that it kind of has a bit of a broader area where it's grown. But as someone who is a vegetarian for climate reasons, what I didn't realise until a few years ago was that it actually has a very big climate footprint in itself, the way it's traditionally grown. And then the reasons for that are actually quite interesting. It's actually to do with the microbes that live in rice paddies emitting methane, which has a really strong, potent warming effect. So that's kind of an interesting topic in another way as well. And obviously rice is rice. Like it is. You can go anywhere in the world and find a bowl of rice. So it's obviously the ultimate staple crop. So what we do with that obviously really makes a big difference. Yeah.
So climate change is obviously hitting our food systems extremely hard already, but at the same time we've got loads of startups in the Springwise database that are showing us how we can actually rethink the kind of core ingredients themselves or the way that we grow and process them to make our diets more resilient. So that's exactly what we're going to explore today, how innovation is helping us enjoy our favourite foods like coffee, like chocolate, like rice, while protecting the planet. So that includes my personal favourite food, chocolate, and we're going to start off with a chat that I had with Mark Golder, who's the CEO of chocolate-free chocolate company Win-Win. Hi Mark, thanks very much for joining me. Just to start, for the listeners who might not have come across Win-Win before. Could you give us a quick rundown of the startup solution?
Yeah, thanks, Matilda. So Win-Win provides sustainable solutions for some of the world's biggest food systems, and we've decided to start with chocolate. So your listeners may be aware that the chocolate industry is really in a crisis that's driven by climate change. Unfortunately, as the world's hotting up and climate's getting more extreme, the cacao trees, which only grow in a very small part of the world, are really struggling, and that means the yield of cacao is going down. And up until recently, cacao was a critical ingredient in all of the chocolate that the world loves eating all over the world. Our solution is to create that same taste and enjoyment and tasty chocolatey treat, but without needing the cacao at all.
And how did the kind of the initial idea for the solution come about? What's the origin story?
Well, the original founders are Rum and Johnny. Both of them recognised the challenge that the cacao industry and other industries, such as coffee and vanilla, were facing as a result of climate change, and both of them really wanted to do something about that and make some positive change, and became aware of fermentation as a process, an ancient natural process that can create amazing flavours that's used in conventional chocolate making. But really the breakthrough for Win-Win was discovering that we could use fermentation with other plant-based raw materials to produce those same chocolatey flavours, but without the cacao. And once we discovered that, that's been our North Star since then, is to improve the flavour that we can deliver from different types of plant ingredients. We can use different things, and that helps us create a solution that can work for the whole world, actually, by choosing plants that grow in different parts of the world locally. We can then provide a much more environmentally sustainable solution. And so it was the wanting to make a difference, discovering fermentation as an unlock to flavour, and then really perfecting that approach.
You've touched on the kind of issues surrounding, or some of the issues surrounding cacao farming, and sort of how vulnerable the crop is to climate change. Would you say that the chocolate industry kind of as a whole, is it doing enough at the moment to combat the climate and the biodiversity crises?
I mean, look, I love chocolate. I think you mentioned you love chocolate.
Yep.
Most of the world loves chocolate. And, although I don't think anybody's saying that we would starve without chocolate, I think that the world is possibly a slightly happier place when people can enjoy their chocolatey treats. And
I agree.
And the trend for chocolate consumption across the world is going up still. It's going up in conventional markets like Europe and North America, but it's increasing even more quickly in markets such as Asia and India and so on. So there's more of a demand for chocolate, and the conventional chocolate industry is trying to meet that demand. Sadly, climate change is something that we want to make a change to. We want to make an improvement for future generations, but right now it's not going to go away. And the traditional cacao tree, as I mentioned, is really struggling to cope with what's changing in our climate. There are lots of really interesting, innovative ideas that are being tried, not only by us, but by the conventional industry, trying to make the cacao trees more resilient, trying to maybe find different places where cacao trees can grow. But of course, one of the issues there is that cacao grows in equatorial areas, typically populated by rainforest. And what we don't want to see is even more rainforests having to be cut down to make space for cacao trees. So, personally, I think we see a future where this declining cacao crop will become even more precious. And for sure, there will be a place for that, to turn into delicious chocolate for consumers to eat. But we think that will just become increasingly precious and premium. And what we provide at Win-Win is a solution that can cover the rest of the industry. And this is a huge industry, over $100 billion a year industry, and as I mentioned, increasing. So if we all want to continue to enjoy chocolate like we do, then we need a solution that can meet the demand.
Well, I mean, I know I'm speaking for myself, but I definitely don't want to see a chocolate-free future. And in terms of being part of a kind of sustainable food startup, what would you say maybe are three of the biggest challenges that you've seen when it comes to creating and then scaling a new sustainable food product?
Number one, I'd say, is sometimes creating more sustainable solutions seems obvious. What is the more sustainable solution? But actually, what I've found working in several businesses is the more you look into it, where you solve one particular issue with sustainability, sometimes another issue emerges that you hadn't thought of. And I think that, the first challenge I'd say that people face is finding a genuinely more sustainable alternative. And that's not always quite as easy as it sounds. These problems are quite complex. With Win-Win, I'm proud that we've been able to deliver a solution that reduces carbon emissions compared to conventional chocolate, for instance, by over 80% through a variety of different approaches. But that doesn't come without significant effort and lots of work. And I'd say that's challenge number one. Challenge number two is this issue of scaling up. When you're trying to tackle really big sustainability challenges, something like chocolate, which is consumed all around the world, then once you've got your solution, being able to make it big enough to meet the demand for something all around the world is often quite difficult for startups. And I mentioned a moment ago, what we've done at Win-Win is tried to engineer a solution into our product that means we can use different plant-based materials. Let's say if we were producing this in North America compared to Europe, compared to Asia. So we could take locally available ingredients, use that magical fermentation process to create those flavors and turn it into chocolate. So I think anybody who's looking to scale up a sustainable solution, particularly in food, A, make sure it's genuine sustainable, B, think about how are you going to actually scale this up to reach the consumers that you want to reach. And then the third, I think, has to be practical, and for me is about affordability. Having done those first two things, there has to be a solution where consumers can still afford the thing that they previously were used to buying. And we may initially have some aspects of that are a little bit more costly, but I think for it to be a genuine alternative solution, then it needs to be as affordable as possible, and ideally as affordable, if not more affordable than the alternative. Again, with Win-Win, the cacao price has really spiraled over the last 4 or 5 years. And so what we're able to offer is a much more reliable, secure price for our chocolate alternative, which for our customers is really a significant factor in them wanting to make use of Win-Win.
I mean, absolutely. The most sustainable idea in the world, it's not going to have an impact if it's not scalable and accessible. So kind of along the same lines, is there one mistake that you've seen or you see other climate food startups make that you'd warn them against?
I've worked in food my whole career. I started out as a food science graduate from Leeds and started out as a food technologist. The thing that I've always kept at the forefront of my mind is this is food, and how the food tastes is always going to be the most important thing. And I think I have seen, and I think I might have made this mistake myself once or twice in getting so passionate about the sustainable solution and how we're going to do this, that you have to keep at the forefront of your mind that the product needs to taste just as delicious as what consumers are currently familiar with. Otherwise, it would be much more difficult to convince them to transition.
And going back to Win-Win, looking ahead maybe for the next sort of 5 years, are there some key milestones that you hope that as a company you will have hit?
Yeah, for sure. And of course, being the CEO, I could quote you lots of financial milestones and things like that. But maybe for your listeners, I won't cover those in too much detail. 3 milestones. The first would be for us will be really to start to convert a meaningful proportion of the current chocolate segment into cacao-free. What proportion? I might not quote here. I'm very ambitious. I'm very confident in, first of all, in Win-Win's solution, but also there's a clear and apparent need to me that, this is going to happen if we're all going to continue to enjoy those chocolatey treats. And so first milestone for us is that, a significant part of the industry starts to convert into cocoa-free. The second thing that I would like that maybe precedes what I just said is for consumers to become more aware of the opportunity, of the benefit of transitioning. There are issues which are well recognised, and by converting into cocoa-free, we can avoid these issues to do with deforestation, to do with some of the socioeconomic factors around child labour and so on. And so I think, we're working hard at Win-Win to talk about those issues and to raise awareness of some of the consequences of cacao and the way we're doing things at the moment. And we'd really like to grow that awareness, to encourage people then to try the alternative, which is cocoa-free. The third thing for me at Win-Win over 5 years, which actually, is longer than the current life of Win-Win as a business. We've been around for 4 years. So when you talk about 5 years for me and our team, that really feels like quite a long time into the future. We've developed our research and our food tech work to deliver this solution using fermentation to deliver these cacao flavours. But actually, that same approach can tackle some of the other issues, some of the other big food systems that face issues due to climate change. Some of your listeners might be familiar with the issues facing coffee and also then vanilla. And, we're already working on solutions in those food systems as well. And in 5 years' time, not only would I like to have seen Win-Win really be well known and prominent in providing a sustainable alternative to cacao and for chocolate, but actually in 5 years, I'd quite like people also to be recognising us perhaps for providing an alternative solution also for coffee and maybe even vanilla.
Yeah, it's an amazing solution, and I'm really looking forward to kind of seeing how the company does continue expanding and potentially into other products beyond chocolate. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me, Mark.
Wonderful. Thanks for the opportunity, and I hope that you and your listeners will also like to try Win-Win.
So there we had Mark Golder from Win-Win. So a huge thank you to Mark and the team. So Matt, we were lucky enough to actually try some of Win-Win's choc alternatives. Do you want to share what you thought of them?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, first of all, they were tasty.
They were, yeah.
And I don't mean to sound surprised, but I think what really impressed me was the texture as much as anything, actually. I suppose in my head, I had like maybe earlier attempts at like Earthshot's chocolate from years ago in my mind, when I always found like they had kind of like a grainy texture. Yeah. Whereas this was like impeccably smooth. Like it really was like the mouthfeel was really like eating a chocolate button. Like I was very impressed, I have to say. Yeah, I don't think you would have been able to tell unless, I mean, obviously we did tell everyone and people in the office were kind of hesitant at first, but I did notice that the day after when I went back into the office to the coffee machine, it was pretty much all gone. So, well, I think that proves the point, doesn't it?
Yeah, I didn't even see any of the chocolate cookies, which was a shame. But now to move on to another office favourite, coffee. So here's my conversation with the founder of Coffee-Free Coffee producer Morrow, Anna-Sophie Dietjen. Thank you, Anna-Sophie, so much for joining me. Just to start, coffee is obviously one of the world's most popular drinks. So for listeners who might not be familiar, how do you make coffee without coffee beans?
Yeah, really nice to be here today. And yeah, I'm the same. I drink way too much coffee at the moment still. We get this question a lot, actually. So we are creating coffee without coffee beans out of a mix of natural other ingredients. So super important for us that it's all ingredients that drinkers know if they look at the back of pack. But we essentially look at a variety of different crops and grains, so pulses, beans. I can't tell yet because we're still in product development exactly what specific ingredients, but we look at everything, for example, from green lentils to yellow peas to chickpeas to barley. And then we top up some of the more niche coffee notes, if something is more fruity or more floral, or something is a little bit more chocolatey or nutty. We actually look at natural ingredients out there that could kind of replicate those flavors. So we've been looking at fruit powders that are upcycled from fruit that goes to waste, again, we look at, blackberries, strawberries, etc., all the way to more citrus fruits like lemons and limes, etc. So it's very much natural ingredients. The bulk of it are those pulses and grains that can be grown in the UK and Europe.
And what motivated you to start Morrow to begin with, and why was it coffee that you saw as the crop that kind of really needed a sort of a radical rethink?
So I grew up in Italy, where coffee is definitely a way of life. I've just always grown up with coffee from a very early age. Probably not the best thing to drink when you're about 5 years old, but we as kids already drank coffee alternatives, which are quite common at home. So my mum in the evening, for example, drinks a lupin coffee, which is actually made and grown in the local valleys in northern Italy. And then also my grandparents used to drink something called Muckefuck, which is a German, again, alternative for coffee. So I was always quite intrigued about the alternatives that were out there. None of them taste exactly like coffee. So that's kind of what spurred on my interest to see if we could develop something that doesn't just taste like coffee, but also is a sustainable alternative that can help future-proof the industry. And it very much started off because I became quite conscious about where the foods I was eating in general were coming from, and I switched a lot to kind of getting foods from local suppliers, knowing exactly, the farms, etc., where that comes from, and trying to reduce that supply chain. And I realized that the beverage I was drinking 5-6 times a day, aka coffee, I really had no clue where it was coming from. There was also very little information on coffees that you can get in supermarket. Where is it actually grown specifically, down to kind of farm level. So the more we started looking into coffee as a crop, we realized the challenges in the space, not just from a supply chain point of view, and you might have seen this with the rising prices of coffee, supply is going down, demand's going up, but also from a sustainability perspective, it is a monoculture. It's quite a climate sensitive crop. It only grows in certain temperatures, in certain areas around the equator. It likes stable weather, and with the increasing radical kind of extreme weather changes, there's been lots of challenges for farmers to actually produce coffee consistently. So that's why we started looking into it, to see how can we future-proof something that we love, that we drink a lot, and for which the demand is also going up, because obviously we, in the Western world, everyone drinks coffee, but also countries like India, Japan, China are now kind of getting into those consumption habits. And while we're drinking, I think 3 billion cups every day globally, that is set to triple in the next 20-25 years. So there's a lot of demand increase with shrinking supply. So it's all about just not substituting coffee as a drink. I think it will always be there, but just helping to future-proof it and diversify the input that goes into the drink.
In terms of when it comes to talking to new customers, potential customers about coffee-free coffee, what's maybe the biggest misconception do you find when you're kind of talking to, whether it's, potential partners, potential customers?
So we actually are looking to sell our product initially as to businesses. So other, for example, coffee businesses, whether it's global roasters or for example, supermarkets who create their own private label coffee, etc., to start creating hybrid blends. So we've actually seen that to be quite successful as a customer proposition. So to have something that has, for example, 50% coffee and 50% of Morrow. So you still get that coffee, but you also get other ingredients. For example, some of our ingredients are high in fiber and protein, so there might be that added health benefit. I think the general misconception that we have seen, less so from other coffee businesses that are actively looking for alternatives as well and are very aware of the challenges in coffee. With consumers and consumers directly, it's maybe also around, is this a natural product? I think there was a lot of consumers have been burned by the hype of alternative meats, which kind of came to market and had a lot of additives and nasties in there that we don't necessarily want to ingest. So we always get that question, is it an ultra processed food, for example, or is it something where you add chemicals to make it taste like that? Which has been definitely a big kind of education curve and is ongoing, but we very much we always started out focusing on just using natural ingredients, even if that meant that actually our R&D process is taking a lot longer than we initially thought, because we're not just going to add things that can help with that flavor and that feel of coffee. So it's an education journey just as much as it is for consumers as it is for us as well, because we could have gone down an easier way and created something, that assimilates the kind of alternative meats that we saw in the early stages that aren't really natural anymore. But I do think I'm a big advocate for natural ingredients. So that's probably been the biggest challenge.
And in terms of, so you mentioned you're kind of still in the sort of R&D phase, still developing and kind of perfecting the product, if you will. So could you kind of tell us a little bit more about exactly where you're at in terms of scaling the solution?
So we started our product development in the summer of last year, and have gone through essentially what we do. We take natural ingredients and then we roast them in different ways. We mold them in different ways. We have started fermentation and some other approaches as well. So all natural approaches that are also used in the production of coffee at the moment, for example, or other ingredients. To replicate coffee's flavor and aroma is very difficult. Coffee's got over 800,000 chemical compounds that make up the flavor profile. So there's a lot that we need to consider. And we have created prototypes, which we then started testing quite intensively with consumers at trade shows and focus groups, kind of autumn and winter this year. And then we've taken all of that feedback, taken it back to kind of the lab and kind of our testing facilities, and we're now going through the second iteration, which focuses quite heavily also on different fermentation approaches, which can just help, because we've got a good base, but we now need to get kind of the last 30-40% there, and we hope to do that with this next phase, which will last up until the end of the year.
Well, it's kind of exciting to see how far you've come in, well, a relatively short space of time, actually. Yeah. What's, if you could kind of narrow it down to one lesson, what's one thing that you've learned so far building Morrow that you think other climate-focused food entrepreneurs would benefit from knowing?
Research and development, and I think product development, especially in regards to food, and if you're doing something more innovative, it doesn't need to be falling into novel foods, for example, but even that, I mean, the times are very long, so be prepared for that. But I think a big learning is actually the language that we use in the climate-focused sectors more broadly, not just food, is often quite pessimistic. I think a lot of the language focuses on how bad things are now and how the solutions, we should provide should be better and solve all these issues. And I always feel that a lot of it focuses on creating quite negative language about what's currently being done. And we make people feel bad about their current habits, with wording that just leans into that quite negative language, versus I think we just really need to leave that behind and build a really positive language around the future, creating optimistic scenarios, maybe rather than pessimistic scenarios of what the world will look like in 10 years, be more forward looking and just simply focus on what we can do now and the opportunities we have. They will be able to support future generations in a better way, and kind of bring people on a more exciting and optimistic journey with what we're building. And I think a lot of brands have kind of adapted to, whether it's in food or other climate-focused solutions, but have adapted and kind of criticizing what's currently out there and how we will do it better. I think we should just leave the criticism behind and just focus on how could it look like if we actually scale our solutions, and how positive will that be for the world? Because I do just think people get a bit tired of the negative language that's in the space.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the doom and gloom only kind of goes so far. You need to show customers that the sustainable choices are going to be as exciting, more exciting, better for you, better for the planet, rather than kind of guilting people into making different choices. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining me and kind of talking me through the solution. I'm really looking forward to actually seeing Moro in the flesh, whether it's in cafes or whatever in the future. So thank you so much for joining.
Well, thank you so much. And hopefully next year you'll get to try some in the local coffee shops.
Yeah. So yes, thank you very much to Anna Sophie and to Moro. Okay, so we've heard from 2 startups who are doing things really differently when it comes to climate proofing our foods. But what about the big industry players already out there? To find out, I sat down with the managing director of Tilda Rice, JP Laborde, who was fresh off a visit to India to visit some of Tilda's farmers in person, to talk me through how the corporate is strengthening their supply chain in the face of a changing climate. So hi JP, you've had a busy week out in India where you've had the chance to kind of meet some of the Tilda farmers in person. Is there anything that you kind of saw or heard on the ground in terms of how climate change is affecting rice cultivation that you could share?
Yes, last week we went in India with the team to see the progress on all the farming program that we have there. And we have developed what we call the alternate wet dry growing program, where we try to tackle to some extent climate change. So we could see clearly some impact on the in the field for the farmers when we talk about the climate change. So it's affecting farmers to some extent, but I would say that can be sometimes very dramatic in very specific areas, like we've seen in the last few weeks. For example, in Punjab, also in Pakistan, but that has been quite localized in some areas. So I can't say this is all about the rice growing, but that can be specific. But what we heard directly from farmers last week, they are quite concerned about the climate change and the fact that they want to be, sometimes be cautious on how they use water or the electricity, and also how the plant can be strong in terms of cultivation and the growth cycle. So we were delighted last week to see the progress that they've made so far. The objective for us, so with the alternate wet dry technique, the concept is just to put directly a very simple pipe, perforated pipe, that we put directly in the field underneath the soil, 15 centimeters, underneath that ground level, so that farmers can directly see and check the level of water in it. So the rice plant is a very thirsty plant, because that consumes between 3,000 to 5,000 liters per kilogram of paddy. That's quite a lot of water. And the reality of it is, when you keep the rice field completely flooded, it generates that particular methane emission. And by virtue of putting that particular pipe in the field and checking exactly what you do, reducing the level of flooding that you have, you can reduce the methane emission by 45%. And that's what we've been, doing with farmers, to guide them on how we could adjust a little bit the farming practices to get tangible benefits for them, which looks a little bit counterintuitive, because if you reduce level of water that you need and also all different inputs, you may believe that you can reduce your farm yield, or you can be at risk by losing maybe part of the quantity you can produce on the same piece of land. And the reality is rather otherwise, because we are demonstrating with the current program we have that we can do even more with this one. But the main benefit that we could see and we could directly hear from farmers is the water consumption has been reduced by 25% for them, and that's one of the main benefits that they can see directly, in their usage for the rice cultivation.
Obviously, as the climate warms, water usage is becoming, a bigger and bigger issue. But at the same time, you're also kind of helping to tackle the sort of root cause by tackling the methane emissions. So that's really exciting to see. In your view, what would you say is the most important thing that big corporates like Tilda can do to kind of shape more sustainable food systems?
So I think the most important part of it is to make sure that even a corporate like Tilda, that we can also bridge the gap on long term and short term. So long term for us is clearly how we can reduce our carbon footprint, but at the same time, in short term, is how we can also guarantee a better revenue for farmers. And that's their reality. And we should be very mindful of this one because we can't play with their living. And the way we do it is to demonstrate the benefits they can get by changing farming practices and also getting a better net revenues at the end of the crop.
And in terms of kind of looking ahead, you've already talked about the kind of alternate wet-dry method, and obviously if that was kind of implemented at scale, it would have a huge impact on the kind of the footprint of the rice industry. Are there any other solutions or innovations, whether that's kind of other farming techniques or kind of crop science? Are there any other innovations that kind of really excite you when it comes to making climate vulnerable crops like rice more resilient?
Yeah, so we are working on a new innovation. When you apply the AWD in the field, so you reduce actually the level of water that you really need in that one, but you still have a lot of fertilizers used for the plant. And that increases, even if you reduce the methane emission, that increases also what we call the nitrous oxide, which we didn't know 5 years ago, which is new. And we came to know that one when we had a meeting with the Crop Science Center in Cambridge. And we decided to partner with them just to see how we could inoculate a sort of fungi called mycorrhiza to really increase the network of the roots and get the plant much healthier, and then to reduce the level of fertilizer that we can use directly in the field. And by using biofertilizers, we can actually decrease quite a lot the level of nitrous oxide in the field. So last week we saw a very good example on that one. We tested it with farmers, and then we had Emily from CSC in Cambridge coming over just to check, on the reference field where you don't have any particular inoculation on that one. And we had a very, let's say, slim roots because of all the fertilizer that we put in it. And then the other one with the inoculated fungi, and we could see a much healthier plant in terms of size, in terms of color, but also the roots were 4 or 5 times bigger compared to the other one, which is a great sign because that means the plant can resist much more also in terms of drought, in terms of, dry cycle. And that will make it just stronger with a much better yield that we expect that one. On the first test, is something we still need to confirm. That could be 15 to 20% higher for farmers, which is a very tangible benefit for them.
I mean, it's super exciting, the stuff that people are coming up with. Obviously, it's very concerning kind of thinking about how we're going to balance, feeding a growing population with all the difficulties with climate change. But it's really exciting to see all the different solutions that everyone's coming up with. And kind of finally, just to leave off, is if there's one message that you'd like to kind of share with the listeners to kind of help them better understand maybe the impact that their food choices have on the climate. Obviously, we've talked about a lot about kind of corporates and the farmers out there, but is there something you'd like kind of consumers to be more aware of?
Yeah. So I think the essence of our program is really built on relationship. It's something that we need to take to a different level on how we can listen to farmers because they know a lot and we learn from them. It's something that works both ways. But sustainability is really part of our mission. We strongly believe that we can make it as a better world by, delivering a real sustainable program that actually benefits throughout the value chain from farmers to consumers. Because we won't compromise on the quality on what we do. We are known for quality rice. And I think we're going to stay there and try to even improve on that part. And And I think we believe that the best way for consumers to understand sustainability is for us to be transparent and also to make sure that whatever we do is science-based, so we can demonstrate what we do with tangible results. This is our duty to make sure that this is beneficial for farmers, but also that we have a clear impact on that particular carbon footprint. We have reduced over the last 2 years by 35% our carbon footprint. The major part of it comes directly from the rice cultivation. This is why we are very active, but also very excited to see the progress we've made so far. We have nowadays almost 3,200 farmers on board. We started 3 years ago with 50 farmers. So we keep on expanding the program, and the success we have today is to see how many farmers are keen to embark on that particular journey with us. And that's for me the reality on as a brand, Tilda. We need also to make sure that consumers understand in a simple terms what we do, and then to really build that particular confidence and the preference for the brand, because they understand exactly what they do and they believe what we do is also good for the planet and also for them.
Okay, great. Well, it's kind of really exciting to see all the amazing things that Tilda's kind of already sort of pioneering out there, but I'm excited to kind of see where the program continues to go. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk me through that a bit more.
Yeah, no, thank you, Matilda, for having me today.
So that was JP Laborde from Tilda Rice. So thanks very much to JP and indeed all of our interviewees today for shedding light on how we can and already are making sure our food supply chains are climate proofed for the future. So Matt, obviously food is one of the biggest concerns when it comes to talking about climate change and climate action, but the negotiations that we've kind of already mentioned that are taking place at COP at the moment in Belém will be taking sort of a broader approach beyond food. So do you want to talk a bit about what we've been doing in the run-up to COP and how we're getting involved all the way over here in East Grinstead?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a good thing we've got a coffee alternative stocked up, because we've been very busy helping out the ED team, who are obviously putting in some very long hours to produce, amongst lots of other great content, their daily podcast on COP30, which is really fantastic. So we've been sitting in, giving our take on a few of those episodes. We'll actually be doing a takeover of that podcast on the 20th of November, and where we'll be talking about the specific topic of all things AI and sustainability. And we've actually got two great startups lined up to talk to for that, who are doing AI in a slightly different way to how some of the more mainstream models are set up, and applying it to very kind of climate positive applications as well. In the run-up, I've also wrote a piece looking back at the 10 years since we last had, since the Paris Agreement, so in Glasgow, which feels very recent, scarily recent in fact to me, but actually for all we're clearly not on track with what we want to do. That's very clear, but it is reassuring sometimes to remember that some stuff has changed absolutely. In ways that would be considered quite amazing if we weren't already behind the climate clock. So we looked at things like the fall in price of solar panels, the increase in their installed capacity, and whilst it wasn't wholly optimistic, it was nice to see that there has been at least some change. I think the worst thing we can do is to go into this summit thinking that no change is possible whatsoever. So that was a useful exercise for me, and hopefully a good piece of content as well. Absolutely. So there's a lot to be keeping you and us busy. So that brings us to the end of this bumper episode of Future Now. If you've enjoyed listening, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We'll be dropping fresh climate innovation conversations every month with some more brilliant guests lined up. Yes, so next time we'll be taking a grand retrospective, I'm sort of grandly calling it, of this year in clean tech. And so We're featuring some mystery guests who will be
exciting.
confirmed later on. We might be keeping their identity a mystery for excitement purposes. It might be that we haven't had them confirmed yet. I'll let you decide.
Can neither confirm nor deny.
We're going to, the idea is that we're going to be looking at, I'm going to be comparing notes on what we've seen as kind of the big trends across clean tech for 2025 as we look ahead to 2026, which is scary that we're that close already.
Yeah, that's terrifying, but yeah, something to look forward to. So until then, thanks for listening. Goodbye.
Goodbye.